Lines in the Ice: How China is quietly testing the limits of Arctic order, and why the West may once again be arriving late. For centuries, the Arctic was a place where ambition froze before it could harden into strategy. Ice, darkness, and distance served as nature's most reliable non-aligned enforcers. Empires mapped it, explorers perished in it, and admirals largely ignored it. Even during the Cold War, when nuclear submarines prowled beneath the ice and bombers traced polar arcs, the High North remained a theater of deterrence rather than domination. That era is ending. Not with a bang, but with a ship. In the summer of 2025, Xuelong 2, China's first domestically built polar icebreaker, slipped into Arctic waters north of Alaska. Officially, it was conducting scientific research, as it has done before. Unofficially, it was doing something far more consequential, establishing routine Chinese presence in a region where China has no territory, no coastline, and no legal privileges beyond those enjoyed by every other state. Presence, however, is precisely the point. To dismiss the voyage as a benign research mission is to misunderstand how maritime power is accumulated in the 21st century. China has already demonstrated, patiently, methodically, and with considerable success, that the most durable territorial gains are rarely announced. They are normalized. The South China Sea was not seized in a single dramatic move. It was absorbed through repetition. Through surveys, fishing fleets, research platforms, Coast Guard patrols and, eventually, runways and missile sites. Each step, taken alone, was defensible. Together, they created facts that no tribunal could easily erase. The Arctic, it increasingly appears, is next. The method beneath the ice: China's leadership insists that its Arctic activities are peaceful, cooperative, and scientific. This is not untrue. It is also incomplete. Science is rarely just science in geopolitics. It is reconnaissance without the stigma, mapping without the flag, and endurance without the provocation. Under China's doctrine of civil-military fusion, the boundary between civilian research and military utility is intentionally porous. Bathymetric data collected for climate studies today become submarine navigation intelligence tomorrow. Ice condition modeling for shipping efficiency doubles as access planning for naval operations. The Xuelong 2 embodies this duality. With the ability to break through ice up to 1.5 meters thick, it is optimized not for heroic exploration, but for persistence. It can operate where conventional vessels cannot, and, more importantly, return again and again. Reports that additional Chinese icebreakers are en route reinforce the impression that this is not a visit, but the opening phase of a cycle. That cycle is familiar. First comes presence. Then redundancy. Then protection. Finally, dispute. The Arctic has so far escaped this pattern largely because no power had both the incentive and the capability to apply it. Climate change has now supplied the former. China's shipyards have supplied the latter: the law, the loophole, and the leverage. The waters north of Alaska where Xuelong 2 was observed lie within the United States' extended continental shelf. Under United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Washington enjoys exclusive rights to seabed resources there, even though the water column itself remains international. This distinction, between surface freedoms and subsurface sovereignty, is the hinge upon which China's Arctic strategy turns. Innocent passage is legal. Scientific research is generally permissible. Resource extraction is not. But where, precisely, does one activity end and the other begin? When does surveying become prospecting? When does mapping become preparation? The ambiguity is not a flaw in the law, it is its price. China did not create this gray zone, but it is uniquely adept at exploiting it. Beijing's Arctic operations are best understood not as violations, but as tests, of interpretation, of enforcement, and of political will. Each unchallenged transit subtly recalibrates expectations. Each tolerated survey lowers the cost of the next. This is how international waters become areas of interest. And how areas of interest eventually become disputed. The map changes last. Behavior changes first. A near-Arctic state without ice. China describes itself as a near-Arctic state, a phrase that has no basis in law but considerable value in diplomacy. It signals aspiration rather than entitlement, participation rather than possession. Yet it also serves a more strategic purpose. It reframes exclusion as unfairness. If the Arctic is a global commons, Beijing argues, why should geography alone determine who shapes its future? Why should routes that shorten the distance between Asia and Europe be monopolized by those lucky enough to sit closer to the pole? Why should resources unlocked by global warming, driven disproportionately by industrialist economies, be reserved for a select club? These arguments resonate more widely than many Western capitals care to admit. They find sympathetic ears in emerging economies, in multilateral forums, and even among Arctic states keen to attract investment. The Northern Sea Route, running along Russia's Arctic coast, offers a particularly tempting prize. For Chinese shipping, it promises shorter transit times, lower fuel costs, and an alternative to choke points like the Red Sea, where Houthi missiles have recently demonstrated the vulnerability of global trade. The Arctic, in short, is no longer a curiosity. It is becoming an option. And options, in geopolitics, quickly become interests. Russia, gatekeeper, not partner, if China is the Arctic's most ambitious newcomer. Russia remains its undisputed incumbent, with around 57 icebreakers, 41 operational and 7 nuclear-powered. Moscow commands an icebreaking fleet that dwarfs every other nation's combined. Its Arktika-class Leviathans, powered by 60-megawatt reactors, can carve paths through multi-year ice year-round. Plans for even larger, 120-megawatt models underscore Russia's determination to maintain supremacy along the Northern Sea Route. Russia's Arctic posture is not subtle. One of its newest polar patrol vessels, the Ivan Papanin, is armed with missiles, guns and torpedoes, a reminder that in the high north, civilian and military capabilities are increasingly entwined. China's growing presence has been facilitated by cooperation with Moscow, joint patrols, energy investments, and shared opposition to Western sanctions. The inaugural Sino-Russian Arctic Naval Patrol in September 2024, dubbed North Joint, was symbolically significant, even if operationally modest, yet beneath the surface, the relationship is transactional rather than trusting. Russia guards its control of the Northern Sea Route jealously, imposing transit fees and pilotage requirements that irritate Beijing. Moscow welcomes Chinese capital, but not Chinese competition. It wants customers, not co-owners. This tension is manageable so long as the Arctic remains peripheral. It may not be if the region becomes central. Icebreakers and the geometry of power. Icebreakers are not weapons. They do not fire missiles or launch aircraft. Yet in the Arctic, they are the most important military assets of all. Without icebreakers, warships cannot reach the battle space. Submarines cannot be supported. Sensors cannot be deployed or maintained. Logistics chains cannot be sustained. Icebreakers are enablers, platforms that make all other platforms relevant. This is why fleet size matters more than individual capability. Russia's dominance lies not only in nuclear propulsion, but in numbers. It can be present everywhere, all the time. China, by contrast, is building toward sufficiency rather than superiority. Its 4 polar icebreakers, Xue-Long 1, Xue-Long 2, and 2 newer vessels under trial, are few, but they are modern. Plans for a nuclear-powered icebreaker and ambitions for up to 70 ice-capable ships by 2030 suggest a determination to close the gap quickly. The West, meanwhile, is falling behind. The Western deficit, the United States, an Arctic nation by virtue of Alaska, fields just 2 polar-capable vessels, the aging heavy icebreaker Polar Star, commissioned in 1976, and the medium icebreaker Healy, launched in 1999 and optimized for science rather than sovereignty. The Navy has none. Plans for new polar security cutters exist, but progress has been slow, plagued by cost overruns and delays. Steel moves sluggishly through congressional processes. Even as ice retreats faster than expected, Britain's position is scarcely better. The Royal Navy relies primarily on HMS Protector, a single multi-role vessel tasked with patrolling both the Arctic and Antarctic, a geographic absurdity that reflects decades of strategic neglect. NATO, for all its rhetoric, lacks a coherent Arctic posture. Exercises are episodic. Capabilities are uneven. Political attention waxes and wanes with the seasons. In the Arctic, deterrence is not about declarations. It is about persistence. And persistence requires hulls in the water, from lines on maps to lines in ice. The phrase 9-line looms large over any discussion of China's maritime behavior. In the South China Sea, it became shorthand for Beijing's maximalist ambitions and its disdain for international rulings, most notably the 2016 decision by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, which China simply ignored. No similar line is being drawn in the Arctic. Not yet. But focusing on cartography misses the lesson of the South China Sea. The line was the culmination, not the beginning. In the Arctic, the equivalent may not be a dashed boundary, but a web of routines, regular surveys, seasonal transits, joint exercises, cooperative research stations. Each strand alone is innocuous. Together, they form a net. Once such patterns are established, reversing them becomes diplomatically costly and operationally risky. Challenging a ship that has been coming for years looks aggressive. Enforcing a rule long ignored appears arbitrary. This is how fait accompli are constructed, quietly, incrementally, and often legally. A thawing theater, climate change is the great accelerant of Arctic geopolitics. As ice retreats, predictability increases. Shipping windows lengthen. Resource extraction becomes feasible. What was once theoretical becomes commercial. What was commercial becomes strategic. Hydrocarbons, fisheries, rare minerals. The Arctic's potential wealth is vast, even if much of it remains economically marginal. But geopolitics does not wait for profitability. It anticipates it. China's Arctic activities dovetail neatly with its broader Belt and Road Initiative, which now includes a polar Silk Road. The language is benign, the implications are not. Infrastructure creates dependency. Dependency creates influence. Influence, eventually, creates leverage. Presence is power. The arrival of Shuelong 2 in the Arctic should not be greeted with panic. But neither should it be shrugged off. China is not claiming the Arctic. It is positioning itself within it. That distinction matters, but only for now. The lesson of recent decades is that power in the maritime domain accrues to those who show up early and stay late. Treaties follow ships, not the other way around. International order is sustained not by declarations, but by daily, often dull acts of enforcement. The Arctic is thawing, in every sense. Ice is receding. Norms are softening. Competition is intensifying. Those who still see the high north as a backwater may soon discover that it has become a front line. And those who arrive first may find that, like so many before them, they are not easily asked to leave. In geopolitics, as in ice, cracks appear long before collapse. The prudent analyst watches them carefully, before the surface gives way.